Welcome back, everyone, to Unclassified number 12. It's our 12th episode. We've been doing it for 12 weeks now, actually 11 weeks, because remember we had the 2 episodes together. But we're back, and we're better than ever. We have so much to talk about today. A plane hit a helicopter, or the helicopter hit the plane, depending on how you look at it. We also have stuff going on in Israel and Syria, as well as Greenland, and, of course, here in the United States. It is just pandemonium. Last week, we asked all of our viewers, Preston, will Trump be the line of Kharkiv or Damascus, neither or both? And 50% of them said they believe Trump will beat both. He will only be the line of Kharkiv. 25% say that he will both be the line of Kharkiv and Damascus. And 25% said that he will be neither and asked us to stop trolling. So, I mean...
The results are inconclusive.
I don't know.
Yeah.
All are inconclusive. But last night, or on Wednesday night? Thursday morning. No, Thursday night. I don't know. A plane, American Airlines flight, was landing into Ronald Reagan National Airport when it collided with a military Black Hawk helicopter in approach to landing. This is the first in-air collision of a commercial airline since at least 2006, I believe. There are 69 people dead. And it's been crazy here. The military was running training flights when this Black Hawk hit the airplane, and air traffic control confirmed with the Black Hawk that they saw the plane, but now people are saying that perhaps the Black Hawk saw a different plane, and it did not actually see the one that ended up hitting it. Preston, you were in the military, obviously not a flying guy. I wouldn't trust you as my pilot, but what do you say about this?
I think we've gotten so that they are still going through investigations to find out exactly what happened, and I think that's the appropriate position to take. Excuse me, as you know, there's a lot of families grieving here, struggling this morning. Sorry about that. So I do think we need to wait for the information to come out. There's a lot of speculation in different directions that I don't think really helps anything at this point. A couple thoughts, though. I think we have generally underestimated how complex air traffic control is, just because we've done it for so long. We, the United States and the world, generally speaking, have done it so long without major issues like this, that just sit in an airport sometime and look out the window and watch a busy airport and watch the planes coming and going. It's madness, man. The fact that we've got that dialed in and there's so few issues is, I think, underappreciated. That's no excuse by a long shot, but I think we've kind of viewed it almost as we've perfected this and there's no way anything can go wrong. And there's a lot that can go wrong at any given point. Planes and helicopters coming in and taking off in different directions, and certain runways being on and off. Again, not an aviation guy. My limited experience with this in the military was directing fire support, and even that was really complicated because you have aircraft that have to stay at a certain height. So maybe they're not coming below 10,000 feet. Then you've got rotary wing assets that are also coming in, but they're going to stay below 10 and above 3. And then you've got mortars firing below that and artillery firing above that. And you're trying to coordinate this airspace to produce effects on target. And even that, talking about 6 or 7 different things, blows your mind right away. It's very, very complex. So, I imagine we'll hear more about this in the coming days and find out exactly what happened. But there's a lot of human error involved in all of this stuff, and that's kind of what it looks like at this point, just a tragic mistake.
Without a doubt, it is a tragedy, and our hearts go out to the families, and we hope it is resolved here shortly. The holes in their heart will be there forever, but hopefully they can learn to manage that grief. But 14 hours after the crash, absolute pandemonium breaks loose because the President of the United States calls a press conference, and in the press conference, he immediately blames President Obama, President Biden, Pete Buttigieg, DEI, diversity, and dwarves, among many others, for this plane crash, collision, and it has set off a firestorm here in the United States, with now coming out that Elon pushed out the FAA head. Trump fired several key officials in the FAA and the FAA. And then people keep saying, he froze air traffic control hires, and that's true, but it takes 6 months to hire them, so it's not like it would have made a difference. But it's created a complete political firestorm and a tragedy that probably should not have been politicized. And then right before we came to air, he said that the military helicopter was 200 feet above where it should have been. And then he added, "What is so hard to understand about that?" 3 question marks. And I just have to say, that's quite the attitude for a guy who was telling us DEI caused crash yesterday. The FAA says part of the impact, why this happened, was because there was only one controller when typically there are 2. And so one controller was managing ground traffic as well as helicopters and departure and landing. Did you watch any of the circus that followed yesterday? And before I say this, he came back later in the day and they asked him if he would visit the site, and he said, "What site? The water? What do you want me to do? Swim?" Which I know we're all used to it at this point, but yikes. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure we get into some of the foreign affairs stuff for sure, because that
We
tends
will.
to be what we focus more on. I think we should bring up, tragedies like this that happen in the United States. I just generally speaking don't like, and we've seen it for a while now, where something bad happens and you've immediately got folks looking to score political points in any direction. Just with the California wildfires, like they were far from under control, and there was blame going around, and it's frustrating. I don't know if that's where we are or it's just a phase that we're in, but it'd be nice to see a little pause and across the board. And blame, there's going to be plenty of blame to go around down the road, and we can get to that. But in the time being, it seems like energy is better spent towards trying to resolve. Like, so looking at the crash, for instance, like, let's find out what the issue is ASAP, because there's still planes in the air today. And like, we need to find out exactly what happened. That's where 110% of the energy needs to be spent to make sure that air travelers today are as safe as they expect to be. So from any direction, from anyone, I just very much don't like the immediate move to a blame game, if you will.
Nope, agreed. It is. I feel bad for the families, many of which likely would have been finding out their loved one's identity, their fate, around the time that this nonsense is going on. So I can only imagine how they're feeling. But to get to foreign affairs in our USA section here, Colombia and the U.S., we had a trade war on Sunday that lasted 6 hours, right? Does that sound right to you, Preston?
On and off, yep. And I think that actually pretty well encapsulates kind of what we can get ready for in the next couple of years, because it very quickly was top of the news, panic, oh my God, what is this going to mean? And look, if people didn't turn on the news for like a 6 to 9 hour stretch, which is normal, a lot of people aren't living in the news like that, then you just completely miss it. And honestly, this is one of those things where like maybe it would have been better to just miss it, because like it started and ended kind of in the same place and nothing changed, right?
Nothing, literally nothing changed. Yeah, no, it was. We got nothing.
Walk us
out
through
of
it real quick, though. Just walk us
Okay,
through
yeah.
it.
So the U.S. is doing these deportation flights, and they're sending them on military planes, and Brazil complains that the deportees are in chains on these military planes and that the air conditioning broke on one of them, and they called it inhumane. You know the full rundown here. So Colombia then says, well, all right, we're not accepting military deportees that are in chains and that are on military planes. We'll send our presidential plane instead to come pick them up because we want our people to be treated humanely. And Trump did not like this. And so then he put 25 to 50% tariffs on Colombia, as well as restricting visas and everything else until they agreed to the military transfer. Colombia is our largest importer of coffee, I believe, and also where majority of our fresh cut flowers come from. And Valentine's Day is only 14 days away, so don't forget, Preston. And that is, kind of what goes on here. And all of a sudden, the president of Colombia then releases this long rant where he says Donald Trump's going to end the human race with his greed, yada, 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 and basically announces, I'm putting 50% tariffs back on the U.S. And then late at night at around 11:30 p.m., the White House released a statement saying that Colombia agreed to all previous conditions. There's no trade war. But Colombia says, well, that's not true. So basically, Colombia will now get their deportees via their presidential plane, and they will be able to transport them how they want. So the trade war is over. The White House declared victory. Colombia declared victory. Seems pretty self-explanatory, but I said this on Twitter. I think you may have as well. Colombia is a non-NATO major ally. They're also a NATO partner. This is like a crisis that you just pick up the phone and you call and say, what's the deal? And they say, we want to do it this way. And you say, all right, fine. So I'm not sure why it escalated the way it did, but obviously it diffusing the way it did is obviously good. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of this, it's hard to get into the mindset of like what was the plan or process here, because there are some things happening in the last few weeks where it seems like there's not necessarily a plan or process, and it's let's see what happens and deal with it as it shakes out, for better or for worse. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we're back to normal relations with Colombia. I feel like that has to be triggering for some folks. There's got to be a lot of countries looking at that, saying like, what in the hell just happened? To your point, like, can we just call and talk about this instead of having a Twitter battle over trade wars? So we'll see. It's different. Things are different, man. It's going to be a very, how all of this happens. We're seeing it already, right? It's just going to be a very different 4 years than the last 4.
Without a doubt. And also now on Saturday, tariffs on Mexico and Canada will be put in place of 25%, which is higher than the 10% tariff
this
that
Saturday?
has not yet been applied to China. This Saturday. So get your guacamole today, folks, because it's being recorded on Friday the 31st. So get your guacamole today, and I don't know what we get from Canada. I know we get a lot. Oh, we get oil, electricity, I guess, but I don't think we import food products. So, but, Mexico, going to be a tough situation there. And so they have a 25% tariff, which is, China is supposed to have a 10% tariff. It hasn't even been applied yet. I don't know what the end game is here with either one of these countries, unless he wants to renegotiate NAFTA again, but he already did in his first term. So I don't know, but Mexico is a growing, Peter Zion, kind of an oddball, but he's got some interesting insights. I don't know if you read any of his books. He calls the U.S.-Mexico relationship like it'll make the U.S. into even more of a hyperpower because of our favorable demographics and everything. So, not great there, but that's what's happening now. Now, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to get into impoundment and the foreign aid freeze. Do you want to start with foreign aid freeze first, or do you want to start with impoundment first? They're the same thing, but different areas.
The foreign aid freeze is interesting to me. So this was because I have mixed thoughts on it. Trump signed an executive order shortly after he came into office saying we're putting a 90-day freeze on essentially all foreign aid. There were some carve-outs, but it's been, honestly, even that has been debated at this point. Let's say the vast majority of foreign aid has come to a halt, is probably the safe way to put it. A lot of that coming through the State Department and USAID, and they said that there's going to be an evaluation over a 90-day period to see what foreign aid programs meet the president's criteria. And I'm going to paraphrase here, but Secretary Rubio, 99-0 appointed, so like everybody likes Rubio, I guess. The general gist of these programs is they have to benefit the United States. Like there were 3 criteria there, but like the summary is, are these good for the United States? A lot of it from how it looks, intended to kind of carve out waste, fraud, and abuse, or maybe programs that, because look, these exist, programs that were put in place 10, 15, 20 or more years ago, and they don't really serve the same purpose, and they're just there because it's easier to let them go than to actually turn them off. So with that came, anytime you do some broad, you go after something with a sledgehammer like this, there's going to be a lot of individual cases that people bring up and say, what about this? Because, of course, there's a bunch of very humanitarian programs involved in this. There are also some kind of weird ones. And it's interesting to me because we do need to address that. The argument for this is kind of twofold. One, we should be spending that much. Let's say the numbers, I want to say it's like 60 billion, but take that with a grain of salt. Total U.S. aid sent overseas last year, I want to say it was around 60 billion. One argument of that is we should spend that on our citizens. Think of what 60 billion could do for the people of the United States. The other part of that is, even if it's not spent directly on U.S. citizens, could it be used to prevent the United States from going further into debt or maybe paying down some of our debt? That's kind of the core of the argument for this. And where I find myself torn is there's a lot of these programs that really benefit U.S. soft power around the world, but that is very hard to articulate plainly. And I get frustrated when politicians, especially economists, start talking super high level about how, well, the average American wouldn't understand this, it's too complex. Or I guess I should stick with political topics, because I think I'm not stupid. If you can't break it down to where I can understand it, maybe it's too complicated to begin with. And then I immediately find myself feeling that way around some of these foreign aid programs. I cannot clearly articulate how a scholarship program in Burma to underprivileged youth is going to help the United States long term succinctly. It becomes a very complex, and I can get there, but it's not fast, it's not easy, it's not clean. And then I kind of catch myself with the same thing I'm weighing other programs against, of if I can't explain it quickly and easily, maybe it does need more scrutiny. Where do you sit on all this?
I agree with you. I think it's hard to explain the concept of soft power, but it definitely exists, right? And I think it's hard to... Voters, every time they're polled, they say it's 1/3 of the federal budget. It's not. It's 0.5% of the budget. So it's not a whole lot of money. But voters really don't like it, so I'm sure this is popular. But for every minute this money is frozen, China is growing in soft power. And we need to unfreeze it. And Congress, I think, can handle that in the appropriations of figuring out what's going to go where. But Burma, as you mentioned, I mean, that is a Mitch McConnell, that is his special project. That is something he cares deeply about. So I was surprised to see it paused. But also, he's not the majority leader anymore, is he? So.
Yeah, I don't know. It's mixed emotions on this one. It'll be. I expect that we're going to see a lot of waivers come through. I don't know how those have been handled so far, but they did open that up and say, just prove that you're meeting the criteria that this helps the United States. And I'm not qualified to do that around the hundreds or thousands of USAID programs around the world, but there should be somebody in charge of those that can directly point back how this benefits the United States, what mission it serves, what purpose it serves. So not a bad thing to level set on that front. And there's definitely going to be certain programs where it's wait a minute, should we still be spending, I'm making this up for what it's worth, should we still be spending $2 million a year to provide clean drinking water to the residents of London? It's wait, what? Those kind of things are going to be, right?
They
and there's some stuff like that in there. There just has to be, the nature of government. It's not a bad thing if that stuff gets trimmed out. So,
Agreed. Yes, absolutely agree. I did see, correct me if I'm wrong here, they did issue a waiver for PEPFAR, right? This was the anti-HIV campaign George W. Bush started. It saved 25 million lives globally.
I'm not sure. I've not been able to keep track of the waivers.
I know there was a lot of outrage over it, but I thought I saw they issued a waiver for that, hopefully allowing medication to spread. Because apparently with HIV is that if you don't suppress it, then it spreads, and hopefully they don't allow it to spread here. But impoundment here, we're going to touch on this briefly, and then we're going to move into Ukraine, Europe, Israel, Iran, Syria, Middle East, and but impoundment here. I was texting you about this on Tuesday night, or Tuesday morning. The Office of Management and Budget sends out this memo freezing all all spending, federal spending as a whole. They've effectively impounded the money. And what that means is that Congress appropriates, all this cash, and the executive branch, by law, has to spend that money in the way Congress wants them to. Because think of Congress as like the Board of Trustees, and the White House is like the CEO, right? And so they make sure that the country is running all right, and it's spending the money it is being told to spend. Well, the Trump administration said, well, we're not doing that anymore. No one's to spend any money anymore. Complete pause across the board. And it was pandemonium, Preston. As I'm sure you know, Medicaid was frozen. Head Start, which is a program for kindergarten and preschool, completely stopped. Food stamps cut off. FAFSA, you couldn't get access to student loans. Just across the board. The Meals on Wheels CEO was doing media tours, saying what's going on here. I can't deliver meals to seniors tonight. And so then Caroline Leavitt, who is the new White House press secretary, she came on and she kind of just made the situation worse in her press conference, because she said, the memo's obvious. What it says is obvious. And everyone's like, well, not really, because she kept saying that, like, what she said that all the programs that directly give money to citizens is not impacted. But then you have like people like Meals on Wheels and SNAP and stuff like that. People are pointing out like most of these programs aren't direct to people. Only Social Security and Medicare is. Medicaid is not, right? Medicaid goes through things. So that was an issue. So then a federal judge puts a freeze on the order. The next day, she released a tweet and she says, the memo is rescinded, but the order is not. What does that mean to the listeners? I'll tell you, because a federal judge helped everyone learn what that means. Basically, what they want to do is the court put an injunction that said the White House could not talk to agency heads about not spending money until this coming Monday via court order. The White House figured, well, if we rescind the memo, then we get around the court injunction. And a federal judge was not pleased to hear this, and he just said, no, that's not how it works. You just can't rescind the memo and now all of a sudden you can talk. You still have the order in place. So he gave a federal restraining order to the Trump administration on this, and all because of her tweet. So she's doing such a great job at her job. And it is now restricted. There's talk that Trump wants to challenge the impoundment law of the 1970s that Congress passed that makes it so the president has to spend this money. There's no constitutional authority for him to do so, but it is a fight they want. It's a fight Stephen Miller wants, as well as Vogue, his nominee for Office of Management and Budget, or Management Personnel. I don't know. And that is what's going on there. It is crazy. There's also talk that maybe the freeze is still in place despite the federal restraining order. I don't know. But it has been a total mess. Preston, you and I live in the same country. What did you observe of this?
A while ago, I used to feel bad for press secretaries, government press secretaries. Because, like, man, they got to go up there and just, like, face it down every single day. But I don't feel bad for them anymore on any side of the aisle, because they know what they signed up for. It's no secret. Like, they know what the job entails. They know what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to defend the indefendable. They're going to have to spin a yarn about something that everybody saw happen. Like, we've seen this for God knows how long at this point. So it's weird to see these press secretaries still, because I had this, like, it's got to be a tough job, but they also took it. And, like,
yeah,
they knew what they were getting into. So, I don't know, man. It's madness. I don't think the Pentagon has a press secretary yet.
No, they don't.
Or they haven't figured that out yet, because we did see Secretary Hegseth do a presentation just from his desk the other day, which, look, at baseline, I like more communication over less. I'm here for it. But I would expect to see, it'll be interesting to see who they pick for the Pentagon to do that, and probably start to see more communication. I don't know, the Pentagon was putting out quite a bit. Biden got a lot of pushback for not doing hardly any press conferences. The Pentagon, Secretary Austin didn't necessarily do a ton, but my boy General Ryder, he was up there quite a bit.
I love General Ryder.
Those are pretty consistent.
Yeah. Do you prefer? So I'll ask you two questions. Do you think Caroline Leavitt, new press secretary? I don't want to, I don't want to be too rude to her because she is 27. She's my age, and I was rooting for her. And you don't see people our age that often in the White House, but she is uniquely terrible at her job. Do you think she lasts until June, or do you think she's gone? I mean, this is getting a restraining order on the administration is pretty detrimental to your job. So that's my first question for you. Do you think she makes it to June?
No. I think there's going to be so much fire. I think she's going to, and I don't know if this would have been the same for any press secretary, but I think there's going to be people, if this hasn't already started, that are, because she's kind of the face of so many things, I think there's going to be a lot of Trump opponents digging up like any kind of dirt they can and trying to make her the center of a lot of things. And that's probably going to, at some point, that'll like tip the scales.
And then my second question for you is, which approach do you prefer more? Do you prefer more where the president, as we see with Trump, he comes in, he talks himself several times a day in front of the cameras, or do you prefer the Biden approach where you have your press secretaries in the White House and the Pentagon do the speaking for you?
I prefer the Trump approach. Now, at times he says things like the dwarves are blaming dwarfism on the FAA crash. Like that's a part of this. But in talking about like in general, I'm always in favor of more access over less scripted over more scripted, less edited over more edited. So I like that across the board. That process. You might not always get what you like out of it, and at times, I do. Politicians are. There's like in my opinion, I found that business leaders and military folks up to a certain degree are good about this. Politicians are awful about this. Or like, if you don't have the answer, just say, I don't have the answer, but I'd be happy to get back to you on that. I wish we'd see more of that. As opposed to trying to give an answer to something you don't actually have an answer to. But yeah, more access. More access is better.
Yeah,
I'm gonna die on that hill.
I agree with you. Yeah, I like when the president comes out and they talk. Yeah. So now though, Preston, pick a part of the world to pivot to.
Let's jump into Ukraine.
Let's jump. Well,
this has been an interesting one.
We have to jump into it. I mean, I'm not good in combat. That was a dumb joke. Go ahead. Sorry.
All right, we're going to start with the peace plan. So, going back to the middle of the before the campaign even started, right? Trump talked about ending the war before he came into office. Then it was within a day. Most recently, we've heard his envoy Kellogg talk about, let's see what 100 days look like, which is more reasonable to kind of get an assessment of how things are playing out. It's complicated in a lot of ways. And what we saw this last week was what appears to be a leaked version of the Trump peace plan. The way I would probably interpret this is, if there's any validity to it, it's probably just testing the waters to see how it's received. And I should say, before we get into this, well, Ukraine right out the gate said there's no truth to any of this. So keep that back in mind. And there's reasons for Ukraine to say that, if this is or if it isn't the plan. But I think that's something worth knowing. The general gist of it is that Ukraine will be barred from becoming a member of NATO. Ukraine would become neutral, could become a member of the EU by 2030. Ukraine would withdraw from Kursk. It seems like the lines would be set as they are, with some sort of international peacekeeping group. And then there would be an international group or call with Zelensky, Putin, or a meeting, Zelensky, Putin, and Trump sometime in February, and then by May, an end to the war with negotiated by some international group. Again, I think there's some sticking points in there. It's hard to see, as is right now, Ukraine saying, got it. The only thing they're really getting out of this would be that they maintain sovereignty over the rest of their territory. I don't know that they're ready at this point to call it right there. We also don't know what the levers are being pulled behind the scenes. There's been a lot of talk about Trump increasing sanctions on Russia in different ways, which a lot of the Russians are kind of just laughing at, saying, what are you going to do? But, we'll see. Depends how they go about doing that. There are ways to get creative. That's about it right now. Again, have to hammer home, Ukraine says this is not actually a proposal. And the first step of this would be, and I would expect to see this, Trump push for some sort of trilateral meeting between, delegates at least, of Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. But have you seen much on this, Ben? What's your take here?
I have not. I work the international beat, and the international beat has become the United States, so I've kind of been out on Ukraine the past few weeks. But I mean, that peace plan works good, but if Ukraine doesn't want it, I don't want it. But in terms of peace talks, I don't know. I think they're objectively good, but I do think if the peace talks happen in such a way that's coercive to Ukraine, I oppose them. So that's from where I stand on the issue.
It's been a thorny one. I've made some videos on it in the past, and there's very strong feelings on it, and I understand. I tend to be in the camp of if Ukraine wants to continue fighting for some future end state, then I think it would be morally wrong for us to force them to stop. But do we continue with the same level of aid as we always have is a different conversation, right? That's a choice for the United States to make. When looking at this agreement or this tentative plan, there's nothing that really jumps out at me as like, oh my God, yeah, that's a game changer. Now they're going to agree to something. Like, these are all things that have been talked about for a long time. So other than a new administration coming into place, there's no reason why, like, now both sides are like, well, if you put it that way, then yeah, let's wrap this thing up. So I feel like there's got to be another aspect here, some degree of pressure imposed by the United States, NATO, the European Union, China, I don't know. There's another piece here that would have to push this towards both parties actually coming to the table.
Well, let's hope. I mean, would you accept a peace?
Yes. I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm in a position to draw a hard line on that one way or the other. This is a decision, I think. What the peace plan looks like, I think, is a decision for Ukraine and Russia, because those are the two that are going to have to abide by that peace and live with it. We'll have some input, I would imagine, the United States, European Union, and NATO, but those are the two interested parties right now.
Absolutely. Now, is North Korea, what's going on with them? Are they still in Ukraine? What's happening?
Yeah, interesting one here. So, take your pick, 10 to 12,000 on or about North Korean troops had been sent over to Russia. We have now seen, I mean, for what it's worth, there were some pretty interesting claims early on, and people were like, well, I don't know, myself included, let's wait to see what we can see. And we did eventually see it. There was some footage at distance of Ukrainian or North Korean soldiers, but hard to tell exactly. But eventually, some have been captured, some have been killed. Their bodies are covered by Ukraine, and they speak North Korean dialect. Like, they don't speak Russian, they don't speak Ukrainian. So these are North Koreans. They've explained their journey from North Korea to Russia. So they're there. A couple interesting pieces here, though. So the not to bury the headline, it sounds like they've been moved out of Kursk, which is the area that they were fighting in. Ukrainian forces in the last few days have said, we haven't seen these guys in like 2 or 3 weeks. And there's a couple different ways to interpret that. The, very pro-Ukraine view would be a lot of them have been killed and there's not many of them left. And that's why I would probably lean a little bit more towards troop rotations. They were at the front for a period of time, pushed into some assaults. Clearly, a lot of them were killed and wounded. We have that on video. And they're probably being rotated back to backfill those losses or maybe swap out with a new Russian unit that's going to come in. Could be somewhere in between those two. But either way, we have seen a lot of feedback from Ukrainians. This is one of those where the propaganda side, and you can, the propaganda in World War II is something a lot of folks always point to about how everybody really just demonized the enemy into saying that they were essentially subhuman. Like we did it in the United States, and you could see it in German and Japanese propaganda as well. The British did it when looking at the Germans and the Japanese, and I feel like we experienced that a little bit with the North Koreans in this fight, where they were just viewed from the start as being like incompetent cannon fodder. And that was an interesting assessment that proved to not really be true. And I think it really just stemmed from the idea that they were coming from North Korea, because they were sending soldiers, by all accounts. So even if you got like a new soldier, a private or something, they've still gone through some degree of basic training, whereas you've got conscripts in Russia and mobilized soldiers at points in Ukraine that don't have a lot of training before they end up being sent to a combat unit. So anyways, as more and more stories were coming out of these North Korean soldiers, there were a lot of Ukrainians facing them saying they're no joke. They're actually disciplined, and they appear at times to be taking risks that Russian soldiers would not. They, within their own small groups, are able to effectively maneuver, monitor their fires and mass fires in certain areas. So it does sound like the North Koreans, at least the ones they sent, were relatively effective in the fight. That said, a lot of them died, it looks like. And the overall goal there would have been to push Ukraine out of Kursk. Ukraine is still in Kursk. But either way, North Korean troops, seem to be moving off the front lines right now.
Interesting. Do you think they made a big impact? Do you think when the story of this war is told, people say, well, North Korea, they really brought it for the Russians? Or do you think there's going to be a weird factoid you hear?
I think it depends how this war plays out long term. So let's say a peace deal is struck in the next 3 to 6 months. I think the North Korean piece will be a footnote. And it won't make, when you go to your history book and World War II is 3 pages. So there's a ton, or less. So there's a ton of stuff that doesn't make it in there at all. I think that'll be the North Korean story if the war ends in the next 6 months, we'll say. If this goes on and pulls in other countries, I think we'll look at the North Korean events as a trigger to a larger conflict, because this was the first time we saw another nation directly involved in combat operations here. The little caveat is they were inside of Russian territory, but still, you don't see any, American units, any Polish units, any Chinese units. How about Iran? Iran providing weapons to Russia, but no Iranian units. Maybe some volunteers here or there from all these different countries. And you're going to see plenty of guys running around with American flag patches in Ukraine. Those are volunteers that have gone over. There's no American military unit. This is a North Korean military unit. That has the potential to change the dynamics of this conflict. So I think a lot of it depends on, does the war stay relatively regional, or does it expand into more of a global conflict?
And so we talked about an expansion of the conflict 2 weeks ago. Do you think we're closer or further away from it, or do you think we're the same distance as we were then?
No major changes in the last 2 weeks. What we've seen by and large over the course of, and this is one of the tough things about covering a war like Ukraine, is, I don't know, when was the last time Ukraine was the front page on the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or any major publication here in the United States? Probably a while ago. But every single day there's intense fighting, and there's a lot of people dying in this conflict every single day. not just at the front, but there are Russian missile strikes occurring in Ukraine, killing civilians regularly. And just over the course of the last couple of weeks, last about 10 days, we've seen Ukraine carry out long-range drone strikes against Russian oil refineries, which has the potential to have a major impact on the war. I don't know if it's direct.
Yeah.
But 2 major refineries hit. Pretty significant. The footage coming out of those, like the fireballs, are massive. So there are a lot of things happening in this war, day in and day out. The fighting has not stopped by a long shot. But it's a little bit in this phase where, like, none of that, there was no major event that changes, like, is this going to be global or is it going to be the same status quo for another couple of years, if that makes sense?
Yes. Now, a question for you about striking the oil infrastructure. So, we just talked about World War II. World War II, the strategic bombing was, I don't know, it depends on who you ask, but I believe the U.S. military's consensus was that it was ineffective. Ukraine is not doing strategic bombing, but in terms of hitting the oil infrastructure and the various other infrastructure, is this effective, or is Russia just rebuilding it pretty quickly?
The World War II argument there around strategic bombing is really interesting because there's a couple different pieces to it. One is that the bombs were not accurate enough. So, like, the number of bombs dropped, we expected much more damage than actually occurred. Other pieces are how Germany moved their manufacturing facilities around. Some of it went underground. They became more effective. There's all sorts of different viewpoints with that. I do think I'm in the camp, by the way, of if you remove strategic bombing entirely from the war lasts longer. So to me, there was a direct benefit. Whether or not it how much is probably a good debate. This is kind of how Ukraine is fighting the war right now. So if you look at day-to-day updates, what you tend to see are the occasional Russian missile and drone strikes in Ukraine. Every so often they spike and there's a significant barrage. The front lines are generally trending negative for Ukraine. You're seeing, by and large, Russian progress across the front. Some places it's faster, some places it's slower, but there's really not been anywhere in a while now where outside, if you remove Kursk, that incursion where they planted now on Russian territory, if you take that out, it's probably been over a year since Ukraine has conducted any significant offensive or counteroffensive operation. Instead, it's just been kind of backpedaling and forcing Russia to take territory at a significant loss. And they're inflicting pretty significant losses on the Russian military. Instead, what Ukraine is doing is going after some of these softer targets at distance. So we're seeing, at times we've seen airfields targeted and cratered. Right now, there's been a major uptick in going after the energy sector, if you will. So these oil refineries, it has expand this out, to the extreme. If every one of Russia's oil refineries was hit, it would stop their war effort. So what percentage, how many do you have to hit and how frequently to have a major impact on how they conduct the war? Is it 1 a day? Is it 2 a week? Like, there's some number there where it will have an impact on how Russia is able to carry out operations in Ukraine. No idea where that line actually sits, but it's an area that Ukraine seems to have an advantage in right now because they're developing some of these longer range drones. These strikes, man, were like 800 kilometers away from Ukrainian territory. That's further than any Western provided munition we've sent them. Yeah. Like, some of these are well past Moscow.
Jesus.
So Ukrainian manufactured and developed drones, and Russia is complaining right now, a lot of Russians are complaining that they don't have the quantity of air defense assets to effectively defeat this threat. It's not that they're out of surface air missiles or surface air cannons or anything like that. It's that when they built this equipment, it was designed to protect, a military airfield or a naval base or something. And now they're like, shit, we got to put these things around every power generation substation. We've got to put these things all around these oil depots, 800 kilometers into Russian territory. They just don't have enough. So it's a way that Ukraine can, affect some pressure on Russia, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now.
It's interesting. The Russians do a lot of whining, it seems. in a way that the Ukrainians don't. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's just always, if something goes wrong in Russia, something gets bombed, or the Ukrainians are using something. It's like the Germans in World War One when the Americans started using the shotgun, or the trench gun, I believe it was called, and all they did was complain about it. They do a lot of complaining, a lot of whining. Is that just a Russian commentator thing, or am I mistaking Ukraine's suffering, or am I mistaking Ukraine's suffering for not being whining?
Yeah, I think a lot of this stems from, there was a great tweet that I wish I could attribute, but I'm not going to remember it now, where it was along the lines of like, Russia started this war with the assumption that they could bomb their neighbors, but they would never be bombed themselves. And I think it comes back to that, where when this kicked off, the Russians that were, remember there was concern about what's happening in the Donbass and the Russian speakers there and the separatists, and like, are they within artillery range? And I don't think it was ever in the cards for the Russian elite and Putin and the military leadership and the citizens of Russia that here we are coming up on 3 years into the war, and oil depots east of Moscow are going to be blowing up. So I think it's a little bit of, I like that you called it whining, but almost frustration of like, what the hell happened here? Like, this wasn't a threat. 3 years ago, oil depots in central Russia were not blowing up every other week. They are right now. So I think there's a little bit of like, what happened? What's going on here? Annoyed, angry, probably. I would be too.
The the quote about Russia entered the war and they didn't think anyone would bomb them, I keep seeing it. I think it's a brilliant spinoff because it is a spinoff of the Sir Arthur Harris quote, right? Where he said the Germans entered this war thinking that they would bomb everyone else and no one would bomb them, and they bombed the Polish and they bombed the Dutch, the French, the Belgians, and now they're bombing London. So they reap the whirlwind, or he says they reap the wind, so they will sow the whirlwind. And that is the announcement of British and American strategic bombing of Germany. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty badass quote, but I butchered it because I can't figure out what the ending is. But the line of Kharkiv, yesterday we said, not yesterday, but we did say last week that he would be the line of Kharkiv, and that's President Trump. He transferred Patriot missiles from Israel to Ukraine. What do you know about this? This was pretty hush-hush.
Not a lot.
This kind of happened. Yeah. Israel denied that this happened, but they said, we just gave the missiles back to the U.S. We don't know where they went. But the U.S. says we gave them to Ukraine, and Ukraine has confirmed that they also got Israel's Patriot missiles, which is interesting.
Okay.
Maybe the art of the deal is real here. I mean, it certainly is line of Kharkiv behavior, that's for sure. So,
feels like we just need to manufacture more Patriots is the answer, is what we need to do. That's everybody wants. It seems like everybody wants them. There's never enough, and if we're shifting Patriots between two allied countries that are in the midst of a war and are actively using those, maybe we just need more Patriots. And it takes a while and it takes a lot of money, but it seems like if there's anywhere we should add some. Look, if we're going to be taking away funding from a bunch of AIDS programs in Africa, maybe we reinvest that into Patriot missile defense. I don't know.
I have to tell it is strange to me that it seems like there isn't a larger discussion about producing more Patriot missiles. It's always just like, well, if we do some like, maybe we could borrow one from Egypt and like Korea, and then maybe Thailand will give us like some of the parts for it, and then we'll send it all to Ukraine. There's never any talks of like, yeah, so we're going to make 30 more and we're going to give them. I know, like you said, it's hard, it's difficult to manufacture these, but it is weird that the conversation is always around what countries can we take it from and give it to? Ukraine, right?
It almost comes at it like the manufacturing capability is capped, and we have to work with what we have, right? Instead of increasing the cap. Yeah, you're right. I agree. Because anytime one of these things is mentioned, you'll see them say like, what was it? It was under Biden. It was a few months ago where there was something about new Patriots, and they're like, what this is going to do is it's going to shift down the priority for other countries that aren't at war. So it was like in 3 years when new Patriots come out, Poland will get theirs a year after Ukraine or something, where it was like, what are we doing messing around with 2026 deliveries? I agree.
Could you
I don't know.
imagine?
Maybe they're smarter than me.
Like in World War II, the whole thing was like, oh, you woke up the industrial giant. Now it's like if we were in a war, it's just like, just you wait. In 5 years, we're gonna bomb the hell out of you as soon as we're done making our,
Yeah.
smart
Hold up.
smart missiles that we can sync up to our phone and play music on. So just wait, because they take forever with that. But on the topic of Europe here, let's pivot up north before we go to the Middle East. Greenland, perhaps maybe a part of the United States soon, but currently a colony of Denmark. Not a colony. I think it is a colony,
the right
but
word?
they have a more politically correct term for it.
Protectorate?
But protectorate, yes, there we go. And so basically, as you know, President Trump wants to take this. I have to say, folks, our intention with this podcast is to talk about international affairs, but he is so President Trump, the domestic situation in the United States is the international news, and he's so in everything that there's always an angle for him and stuff. So I apologize if you're annoyed at hearing his name, whether you like him or you dislike him. He's just part of these stories. But when it comes to President Trump said he wants to take Greenland, then he got on the phone with the Danish premier, right? And he was shouting at her, and she offered him military bases and mineral rights, which I should note, the original treaty that still lasts between the Danes and the Americans allows the United States to do that without permission, which makes the demand for Greenland even weirder, right? Because just like you already have the mineral rights. You can already build as many things you want there. The U.S. effectively controls the island already. But anyways, then Trump got off the phone and took a press conference. He said it would be an extremely unfriendly act for Denmark to not give up Greenland, which is, I don't know, it sounds, I don't like that talk. But now France and the EU military commission are talking about deploying troops to the island in order to deter an American invasion. Trump said he would not rule out military force on Greenland, but then he said tariffs, but he told the Danish premier that one way or the other he was going to get Greenland. So now they're talking about deploying troops there, which is such a insane thing to say, right? It's like we're together, us in Europe, in a war against Russia, and now there's talk about whether or not we need to defend ourselves from one or the other. Now, France, to their credit, though, the foreign minister has said that he thinks this is all bluster, that France will stand with Denmark. We will fight the Americans if you want us to fight the Americans, but we don't think the Americans want to fight. We think no American in their right mind wants to go to war with Europe, and rather that there's just, this is just a fixation. And this is something that the French foreign minister has repeated on my count, I think 5 times now since Greenland first came up. So we'll see if that's true or not.
I mean, I think they're pretty spot on when they say Americans don't want to go to war with Europe over Greenland. Like, for all the Greenland debate, good luck finding anybody that's like, yes, I will risk my life and my children's life for Greenland. For an American citizen saying like, yeah, I'm ready to go die in Greenland. I just take the bluster and the joking aside out of this. I just don't think that anybody is actually in favor of that. I wish we could get this language around some of our adversaries. So, like, let's get that energy, the energy that Trump has, like throwing this stuff out at France and Denmark and Greenland and Colombia. If we can just redirect that to, like, Iran, the Houthis, North Korea, Russia, we'll sprinkle China in there, too. Like, I would love it. I'm here for it. Like, this type of aggressive, over-the-top, make them confused, they don't know what to do. I'm here for that. I don't like it so much when it's being leveled at our allies, but yeah.
If he talked the way about Greenland that he does with Ukraine, or if he talked about Ukraine the way he does Greenland, they'd be building statues of him in Berlin, right? I mean, just like saying the Donbass will belong to Ukraine, right? He just, one way or the other, people would love him. Right? I mean, the Polish people, they would have a Statue of Liberty, but it'd just be Donald Trump's face, instead of the original face on it. It would be crazy. I mean, he would have like his own Bill Clinton Kosovo statue in every Ukrainian city. And so I hope he starts doing that, because this Greenland thing is needlessly stressing out everyone on both sides of the pond, and no one likes it. And it's just, I don't know. It just seems like a very dumb thing for us to act on. But speaking of dumb things, the Middle East, God knows what's going on there in any given
what
time.
a transition. Rough transition there, man.
Well, the people are great. We love the people in the Middle East. But the geopolitics, I mean, crazy stuff going on there always. But tell us about what is happening with Jolani, the savior of Syria, and soon-to-be President Trump's best friend. What is going on with Mr. Jolani here?
So Syria is one of the places where I feel like we're bringing this up every week because they're just kind of waiting on pins and needles for like what is the thing that's going to happen, and like nothing has happened. It's all actually been relatively calm and a general peaceful transition of power. There's a lot still lingering on the edges. Like Israel has still moved into Syrian territory. It's like we're going to hold on to this until you can prove that you're a functioning state. But Jolani has kind of taken a new name, if you will, Ahmed al-Shara. And he gave an address yesterday.
Wait, time out. Back up. He took on a new name?
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Let me look up.
So, that's strange, right? Like, that'd be like if...
Let me just pull up DeepSeek real quick.
Or Macron or Trump.
Questions.
Oh, yeah. It'll have all the answers, right? Does any other country do that?
Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, so that was his original name, known by his nom de guerre, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. So he went back to his original name. Or, I don't know, like, who knows? Maybe in person the entire time he's been like, my name is al-Shara, and it's all of us assholes out here calling him Jolani, and he didn't want that. I don't know. So it's the same person. That's, I guess, his original name. He took on a new name
is that
as
like
a
a
Syrian
normal
revolutionary. We have seen that at times in the jihadi circles, where they'll take on new names, kind of more militant-sounding names. There was a period of time with Al-Qaeda where guys would take on new names to kind of show their lineage in a way, like more their credibility, especially with some of the foreign fighters. So I don't know. Maybe that's the Jolani piece here.
I'll say Jolani is not a very scary name. I hear the name Jolani and I think Tennessee Dolly Parton. Okay?
Okay.
It does not strike fear in me. So...
I'll pass it on. So he gave a speech to the piece, the newly appointed president, and he put out a speech saying that they're going to build Syria for the Syrian people. This is a call to the Syrians to participate in building a new homeland, one that will be governed by justice and consultation. But as you can kind of expect, people are coming at this from a bunch of different angles. Anytime somebody topples a government and then immediately is the one placed in power, there's folks that are like, wait a minute, I don't necessarily like where this is going. That said, like, I don't know, it seems like kind of the best that they can do right now. And my stance on all of this is like, if the Syrian people are happy and happier than they were under the brutal, oppressive regime of Assad, then like, okay, let's give it a shot. And it seems like they're still giving it a shot. So, still issues in Syria. I think overnight, CENTCOM violated the president's ban on don't put out tweets or media, and they said we killed an al-Qaeda leader in Syria, which I'm fine with that. Like, that's okay. Let's put that information out there. So still U.S. airstrikes in portions of the country. Still a lot of questions about what Turkey's going to do up north. Again, Israel is in Syria now. Like, take the Golan Heights argument, set that aside. We're not even talking about that. They are in Syria proper. And they're building bases there, it looks like, which means they probably don't have a lot of confidence that Jolani, I'm just going to keep calling him Jolani. Jolani, is that disrespectful?
I don't think so.
Or respectful?
No, you can call... I mean, no, he's Jolani.
Okay. Always Jolani. I guess Israel, understandably so, doesn't have a lot of confidence that this reformed jihadi is going to be able to exert significant control over the entire country of Syria. But either way, there has been some recent footage coming out showing some of the atrocities of the Assad regime. But in terms of like overall unrest, it's not really happening. Syria's pretty stable for Syria.
Will he win them over, you think? Do you think Jolani's plan is to win over all the factions, that whole territory, just by building roads and stuff? Like, the way I would say is FDR, everyone loved FDR, right? So much they gave him 4 terms, but he did it because he was building roads and putting phone lines in and making clean water and everything in a country that did not have it, right? Do you think Jolani will aim for the same? Do you think he'll go by AAS, like FDR went by FDR? So, I mean, like, what do you think's going to happen here?
Yeah, good question. I think he will try, but Syria is very, very complicated. And, like, again, I barely understand American politics. When you get into Syria, you're talking about very overt international pressure from Turkey, from Iran, from Hezbollah to the degree that they're still there. Israel has some pressure and influence in the south. Like, I think Jolani will. It seems like that's what he's going to try to do. But even external influence aside, there are so many different ethnicities, religious groups. I have no idea if it's possible for him to actually have a total support, I guess. I don't know if that's even attainable. Why are you looking at me like that?
Oh, you froze on my end. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
It was just
Preston
groundbreaking.
and I have maybe a 1 to 2 second delay between us. Currently,
which I think is a cause of Ben's camera now.
I think it's me.
I think it's your fault.
If here's some lore for all of you. Preston, when we're going to do this, Preston's like, send me a link to a webcam that you think would be good for the pod. So I sent him a link to my webcam. It, like, broke his computer. And now it might be breaking mine. Look, who's to say? But, yeah, so we're dealing with a little bit of lag this week. So maybe it's a little awkward if it sounds like it's because we are reacting behind each other, perhaps maybe talking over each other in the actual recording. I have no idea. But Gaza. Yeah. I hear there's going to be a resort here. What do you hear about this?
Yeah, so the ceasefire is ongoing, and it's still in effect. It feels, the pessimistic side of me says this thing's going to fall apart soon because Hamas, we've gone through 3 kind of phases of prisoner release, and in this most recent ceasefire, and Hamas is straight up putting on parades, and the footage coming out of Gaza is like it's a militant-run city at this point. Like, they've got their uniforms, they've got their weapons, parades, flags, they're putting up banners celebrating Sinwar. Like, it seems overly celebratory while the ceasefire still hangs in the balance, if that makes sense. In fact, this most recent one, Israel pushed back the release of Palestinian prisoners because they said this is too much, like, these celebrations. They said that it was, I can't remember the exact phrase, but essentially, like, it was dangerous and detrimental to the hostages to pull them out into this, raging crowd of Hamas supporters. So it feels very much on the ropes, but it is still continuing, and more exchanges have occurred. Trump last week, in true Trump fashion, like off the cuff at the end of an interview, said maybe we should just clean out Gaza entirely and move the Palestinians into Jordan and Egypt. I think there's a couple different ways to look at that, and that's true. Yeah, that's a challenge.
He says they're going to anyways.
Jordan and Egypt, from the get-go of this conflict, there's been a lot of pressure on both those countries saying, like, hey, where you at, guys? Like, you going to do anything here? But anyways, this has been viewed a couple different ways. One is, if you look at footage of the Gaza Strip right now, like, there's portions that's just rubble. Like, entire city blocks and more that are just rubble. So anywhere else in the world, you would look at that and say, cool, people can't live there. They need to go somewhere else while we rebuild it. Because, like, people just relocated from southern and northern Gaza this week and found out there's no drinking water up there. Like, the infrastructure is gone. So you can't reasonably expect to rebuild that while people still live there. Like, there's no way for people to live there. So the idea of moving, again, I think for this view, I think it's worth not considering this Gaza, but like anywhere else in the world, you would move those people out of there to rebuild. And they're out for a year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it takes, and then they can come back in. The concern in Gaza is that this would be kind of step one of ethnic cleansing. Like, they're moving them out of their territory and they're not going to be permitted to come back. And it's just kind of an underhand way to do that. And you'll find some pro-Palestinian arguments that this has been Israel's plan the whole time, is make Gaza unlivable to where the Palestinian people find no other option but to leave because they physically cannot live there anymore. And then, bam, Israel has resolved the Gaza issue. So, yeah, Trump just kind of rattled that off the cuff, letting it fly. And it is a hot button issue, to say the least.
Well, I agree. Hot button issue. Is that true that they move them out, though? I mean, after World War II, Europe, they had to, they lived there, right? So, Europeans had to rebuild in the ruins of the cities that they just destroyed of each other. Is that normal for them to move out and then rebuild?
So part of the challenge here is the Gaza Strip is small. So there's just not a lot of places for these people to go. And they're fenced in to a degree, right? Like, somebody that lived in Berlin at the end of the war, they could leave Berlin and go somewhere else in Germany, even to just small towns and villages in the suburbs that maybe weren't bombed and still had running water. That's not really an option in Gaza. They can move into the fields nearby, but again, there's no infrastructure there, so it'd be tent cities. It's just a little bit different dynamic in that sense. And some of these areas, there were portions of Europe after World War II that were reduced to rubble. There were other portions where it was just severely damaged, right? And you could still go into your house, and your house might still have electricity. There are entire blocks of Gaza where it's just destruction. And you have to clear it out. And on top of the clearing out piece, again, this is not unique to Gaza. It goes back to any war. There's going to be landmines in there. There's going to be unexploded ordnance. So it's not a matter of just get the bulldozers in and start pushing, because one of those bulldozers are going to blow up. Because bombs at times do not detonate when they hit the ground, unfortunately. There's a dud rate. And you send a bulldozer in there, start plowing this thing over without actually clearing it for ordnance, and it's going to go boom and kill innocent civilians at that point. Aid workers that have come in to rebuild the strip. So in a perfect world, you would say no people can be there for a period of time. We have to get them out to facilitate rebuilding. But there's a lot of implications to that in this specific instance.
Let me ask you this. So, I mean this genuinely. What is the difference between, and this is not about Gaza, I want to clarify, but what is the difference between Israel's settlement in the Middle East and that of any other World War II resettlement? Germans were forcefully removed after the war from Poland, from Austria. It was gruesome, it was wrong, but those countries are now Austria and Poland. Germany just can't take it back. So my question for you is, why is this Israel-Palestine thing any different? Where it's Israel exists. It's been there. I would argue they need to respect, perhaps, Palestine's sovereignty a bit more, but I don't understand the Palestinian belief that they have any right to Israel still. How is it any different than any other post-World War II resettlement?
In the sense of
question?
They would, not entirely. So, in the sense that they would definitely return, no questions asked, kind of thing.
Yeah, this belief that Palestinians believe they still have a claim to Israel, and that their supporters in the West say that they should come back and that they're going to overtake and take it back. But what I'm saying is, this happened all around the world in World War II, and for the most part, it was an injustice. But now those places are countries, and you just can't take it back, right? So my question is, why does it seem that mindset is different in the Israel-Palestine than it is in Europe or Asia or anywhere else that saw vast resettlements of people.
Gotcha. Way over my head. I understand what you're getting at, but I think that's the kind of thing where you end up in. It's a mix of long historical debates that I'm just not all that well versed in.
Yeah, I don't have the answer either. Obviously, that's why I'm asking. So I don't know. But I guess if the commenters know, feel free to let us know, because it's a question that I've been interested to learn.
Certainly,
to find
like
out why it's
easily answered, non-debatable question.
I mean, on everyone's favorite topic too, So
yeah.
But Preston, what else is happening?
Well, maybe, possibly, you and I working on a trip here in the next couple weeks. Put out more information as soon as that's solidified. But that should be fun. Maybe a show on the road at a location to
Absolutely.
be determined. Yeah.
Yes, sir. We're going to be travelers here this month, interestingly. And so that's going on there. And, yeah, nothing new on my end. Hopefully we have more interesting international news for all of you next week. Because I'm tired of talking about this country.
Well, so a thought on that, because you and I were texting about this week, is you were saying, looking back at the previous Trump presidency, he made so much of it about him that, like, everything that happened was about him, that it kind of drowned out a lot of the international news. And we were talking about that. Like, is that actually a thing? Or is it not? Is that just how media is covering things? Like, I think that's something you and I are going to have to balance. There's a lot of things happening around the world. It didn't stop.
True.
Trump and the things he's doing has taken hold in U.S. media. And I think we're just going to have to find a good way to balance, like, yes, Trump talking about taking Greenland by force is something we should discuss, but make sure that we don't get caught in maybe that same trap that traditional media has at times. Mm-hmm. I think it's something we're just going to have to think about.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think this is why the geopolitics creator community, it was much smaller from 2017 and 2020, but I would argue exploded in 2021, just because all incentives for everyone involved, from Johnny Harris to me to everyone else, was to focus on the U.S. domestically, right, and what's happening, because President Trump, he's the reality TV star, right? So everything revolves around him. I wonder if we'll see the same effects, because 2021 there was an obvious push by everyone to look outward, and now we're looking inward again. So I wonder if, but also I guess, as you said, as we were texting, not a whole lot's happened around the globe in the past since November 5th, right? November 6th. So, or was it November 8th? It doesn't matter. But not a whole lot's gone on. And maybe the ecosystem looks a little different if Ukraine is doing an offensive, or Russia's doing one, or something's happening to Israel, Palestine, who knows? So I guess we will all find out together. But hopefully our geopolitical international affairs community stays in one piece as this goes on. And hopefully no one's interest dies out. But who knows? Maybe the end of wars is coming. Or maybe the new war is coming. I don't know.
Well, I think that we can probably wrap. And you and I got to talk planning on the trip.
Yeah. Got to figure out what we're going to do. Horse and mule. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Subscribe if you're still watching. Oh, we forgot to tell people at the top of the episode. Anyways, subscribe, like, comment, give us 5 stars. And I know we said last week and the week before that President Trump would be on, but he's had another commitment this week, so he will be on next week, though. So tune in for that. We're very excited to have him on, and thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.